everybody, and welcome to the Legislative Journal for February of 2025. We are just reacting to the governor's budget address. Governor Shapiro with a very long speech, as he likes to do, a very grand budget address. A lot of things to take away, Rep. What were some of the highlights for you from Governor Shapiro's address?
Right. Yeah. By way of background, this is part of the annual budget cycle. I mean, the governor makes his proposal typically in early February, and that starts this process of the legislature working on a budget which is typically consummated by the end of June, when our fiscal year ends. After the budget address, we begin the process of budget hearings, where the Appropriations Committee and the appropriate standing committee chairman interrogate the various department heads: the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Environmental Protection, and so forth and so on. So this budget address and the intended budget document, which the governor presents, starts the process. This particular address, I guess, we were told to bring snacks to the hearing room because it was going to be a long one, and true to form, it was. It was about an hour and a half, crammed with lots of information about lots of issues, and also cameo appearances by various citizens of the Commonwealth for various reasons. I, as chairman of the Environmental Committee, tend to focus in on the environmental issues. And near the end of the speech, the governor made reference to his so-called lightning energy plan, which laid out a couple of different planks he is proposing. In the budget materials, the written materials he presented to the public, I noticed a 15-person increase in the Department of Environmental Protection. The problem with that is that the Department of Environmental Protection is woefully understaffed. They're probably down 600 positions since 2002, and since that time, since 2002, their duties have increased substantially due to the emergence of the conventional oil and gas industry in Pennsylvania. So they have across the board shortages. Their water program, for example, I'm told they have about 20 stream biologists. They need double that. That was not addressed in this budget. They should be inspecting streams every 5 to 10 years, depending on who you're asking, but they're only inspecting streams once every 30 years. And one of the objective measures of non-performance there is that 28,000 miles of Pennsylvania streams are impaired in some way. That is a full 1/3 of streams are impaired. So water quality is a problem. We are not, as a state, meeting our nitrogen reduction requirements for the Chesapeake Bay. We continue to pollute the Chesapeake Bay. A lot of that is due to runoff of fertilizers and such on Pennsylvania's farmland, and we just don't have the boots on the ground to assist farmers in reducing that runoff. I think a couple years ago, watershed implementation plan relating to the Chesapeake Bay said that we're about 100 people short in that endeavor. So the water program is substantially understaffed. The oil and gas program full complement a number of years back was, I think around 2016 was about 228 people. They say they're down to about 190 people now, but even their internal documentation shows that wells, conventional wells, continue to be abandoned at a rate much faster than they are plugged, and the consequences of abandoned conventional wells are methane leakage, which is a powerful greenhouse gas, water pollution, risk of explosion. This report, which came out in December of 2022, indicated that drillers are not meeting their legal obligations with regard to reporting their production data. Brine, in other words, produced water, the byproducts of these drilling operations are being continued to be spread illegally on roadways. We don't have the boots on the ground to stop that. So the oil and gas program is underfunded. I think the air program is probably down 100 positions from a decade or so ago. Our HASCA program, we are not, cleaning up at a quick enough rate our polluted sites, and that becomes an increasing problem with PFAS. So I think, getting back to the budget, it's just we're not giving the DEP the resources they need, and that's one thing I will bring up in these budget hearings. But the real problem here is that the DEP seems to refuse to speak out publicly about this lack of resources. They seem to just insist on being the good soldiers who just do with what they can with what they get, and don't seem to be advocates for themselves. So yeah, that's as far as the budget goes. That has not been addressed, and perhaps just without questioning motives, or perhaps questioning motives, I think the governor understands that the Republicans want a weak Department of Environmental Protection, just as conservatives in Washington want a weak Internal Revenue Service, so their base is not, their tax obligations are not aggressively enforced. I think Republicans in Harrisburg deliberately want a weak Department of Environmental Protection, so these environmental laws are not enforced aggressively with their base. So the typical dynamic with regard to the budget is, the Dems, get Department of Environmental Protection and other weakening of various environmental laws and regulations. So the budget, it full of pomp and circumstance, full of information, but at the end of the day, just looking at it from an environmental perspective, I was not impressed with it. We mentioned, the governor in that budget mentioned his so-called lightning plan on energy, and I found that title a little bit ironic, since the major pieces of it, his PACER bill and his press bill, the PACER bill relating to his sort of Pennsylvania-only regional greenhouse gas initiative, and the press bill, which is increasing his alternative energy portfolio standard. He calls it a lightning proposal, but those bills didn't move an inch last year. So as far as speed of implementation, I'm not sure lightning is the best word to describe that.
All righty. And something that's not coming all that fast either are the budget hearings. Obviously, it's going to take some time to get through all of those. They drone on. That's the next step, as you mentioned already, Rep. February 27th, and that's the big one, at least for you, with the DEP and the DCNR. Any idea what you're going to try and get out of these hearings, or what you expect to come from these hearings, and maybe trying to get a little bit more padding to environmental issues in the upcoming budget when the House gets its turn to kind of morph what the governor has proposed?
Right. So, yeah, they've actually combined the Department of Environmental Protection, which deals with enforcement of environmental laws, and the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, whose job is sort of to protect state lands, things like state parks, state forests, game land. They actually kind of combine them into one hearing and most of the questions are directed towards the Department of Environmental Protection, not the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Yeah, so Jessica Shirley, she's the Secretary of Environmental Protection, and Cindy Dunn is the Secretary of Conservation and Natural Resources. It may be just a repeat of last year, bemoaning the fact that this agency, Department of Environmental Protection, is understaffed, and trying to use I don't know whether it's 3 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it is, using it as a sort of a platform to sort of highlight that, hoping that it'll be picked up by the press or other groups, and then just try to hammer that point home. So that's probably how I will approach those hearings. So if I could, I'll just get back to the issue of the governor's PACER program and how it relates to the RGGI program, because, and that's important because Pennsylvania's entry into RGGI, or the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, was the most important climate change piece of the previous governor, Governor Wolf's administration. He really made a point to prioritize that and not compromise and bow to the pressures of conservatives on his regional greenhouse gas program. And just by way of background, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in Pennsylvania, well, back up a bit. It's a Mid-Atlantic and Northeastern states program. I think we have 11 states involved, and it's a cap and trade program relating to greenhouse gas emissions from the power sector. The coal and gas-fired power plants that generate electricity. And the way it works is, in those states that have implemented is that a cap is set on the total amount of greenhouse gas emissions that come from the power sector. And that cap is slowly reduced over time. And the various emitters of these greenhouse gas emissions, the coal-fired power plants, the gas-fired power plants, and so forth, they have to a market is created for their right to put this greenhouse gas into the atmosphere, and there's trading going on. So it's a very market-based solution to reducing greenhouse gas, with the most efficient reducers succeeding. Now, this is dead on arrival in the Senate. The Senate would never approve something like this because they're conservatives and they're greatly influenced by the oil and gas industry. So Governor Wolf tried to do it not through legislation, which, as mentioned, would fail in the Senate, but through regulation. In other words, pursuant to a regulation based on existing law, in this case, the Clean Air Act. And we actually did pass those regulations during the Wolf administration, but they were immediately challenged in court by a number of litigants, the gas industry, but also it's important to note the building trades, the labor also was filed a brief against these things. Now this is languishing in the courts right now. I've recently reached out to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to get a status report because it's just been a couple of years now, and there's just no sense of urgency. This case is not listed for their March dockets. It's not listed, it's not listed for consideration, and our only salvation here is to have the Supreme Court find that these regulations are constitutional. The governor's proposal, this PACER program, and the PACER program is sort of like it's sort of like a Pennsylvania version of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It's sort of like having Pennsylvania do the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, this 11-state proposal, just doing it in Pennsylvania only. And that is, I think it makes, it creates the perception of progress, but that's just not happening in our Senate. I think Senator Pittman, who's the majority leader, has said as much, and people who follow Harrisburg just know that to be the case. And so really, I think what needs to be done now is more pressure, perhaps from the governor, directed at the PA Supreme Court, just saying, make a decision on this, make a decision, do something, because it's not happening any other way. And this isn't something where there's just this infinite amount of time to act on it. It's climate change gets worse every day. I mean, you're seeing, Los Angeles and the wildfires associated with it and the terrible damage there. I mean, it's an important problem, but there just seems to be no sense of urgency. And so there you go. That's an important issue, trying to get Reggie moving along. And, I think, the governor's energy plan, it's, in theory, it's fine, but politically, getting PACER or press through our Senate, not happening.
And bringing it back to the legislative body, back to the House, obviously last show we mentioned how there was a split in the committees. There is now kind of the energy that spawned off the old committee, and you were still the chair of Environmental and Natural Resource Protection. After a couple of days getting together in those committees before legislative sessions, how have those been going so far?
I think they're going fine. I was a little worried in the beginning because when I heard that energy was being removed from our committee, my complaint to our leadership who made this decision was that energy is the most important piece as far as environmental protection goes. But I've been watching the bills that have been referred to our committee, and I think it's going to be fine. My philosophy is that there's plenty of good work around for anybody who wants to do it. So there are, I think we will be doing fine. So my committee is moving forward. We had our reorganizational meeting, now we're getting ready to, do some public hearings and move some legislation.
Awesome. And I imagine there's as you mentioned, some upcoming hearings. Can you give us a little bit of a preview as to what those are going to be all about?
Right. So we talked last show about the issue of issuing permits in environmental justice areas. In other words, when the DEP issues permits in environmental justice areas, think the city of Chester. Right now, they can't consider the cumulative impact of the pollution that the new permit applicant, what his facility will pollute compared to what's already there. Now, you can't, but you should, because that's what really affects the health of these environmental justice areas. So I introduced a bill that Representative Bullock, who's since moved on to other things, introduced last session, which would let the Department of Environmental Protection consider this cumulative impact. And it didn't move last session, although we did amend it in committee, and because Labor blocked it, that's what we're told. We couldn't get a floor vote on it because Labor didn't want it, and I think Labor does not want it because they think it would give the Department of Environmental Protection the ability to block a liquid natural gas terminal in the Chester or Philadelphia area, which is under consideration or is desired by oil and gas groups, labor groups, and so forth. So in my mind, it really presents this real stark contrast. Like it really sort of presents the question: what do we prioritize as, for example, as a House Democratic Caucus? Do we prioritize keeping our political interests, the building trades, happy, and thus further our own political interests, or do we prioritize keeping poor people healthy, which is, so it's sort of a test for us as Democrats. And so we're going to air that issue out. We're going to air this bill out. It's House Bill 109. And it's and we want to go right into the city of Chester to have this hearing because that's where the problem is. And we are going to do it at Widener University. We're zeroing in on a couple of dates, maybe March 4th, March 10th are kind of the most likely dates, but it hasn't been set up. We've secured a couple of speakers, Izuli Mayfield, an activist in Chester. We're trying to get someone from the DEP to testify. We'll bring in someone from Labor. We're also talking with other people, perhaps someone from the Physicians for Social Responsibility. I think we've already signed up someone from the Chester Health Department. So we are trying to air that issue out. Not sure if the political dynamics have changed to allow that bill to go through, but you have to kind of keep pressure up on these issues. If not, I mean, what the heck are we doing here if we're not raising these important issues? So so that's one hearing that we are planning. I'm sure we will do one, perhaps multiple hearings with regard to the oil and gas industry. We may revisit issues we did last term relating to the abandonment of wells and the need for increased bonding. We may do a hearing on setbacks of well pads from streams and houses and schools and hospitals. We may do a hearing again on the illegal spreading of roadside of brine, in other words, that polluted water that comes from drilling, the practice of roadside spreading it. So that's one or multiple hearings, and maybe just a hearing on climate change and what Pennsylvania's doing, and what Pennsylvania's responsible for, and what Pennsylvania is failing to do. Just so people don't forget. I mean, don't forget, what a serious problem it is, and how Pennsylvania has such a a big role in that. We reached out to Dr. Richard Alley, who's spoke at our hearings in the past, and he's agreed to testify. And we're reaching out to others also. And as I think I may have mentioned earlier in the show, perhaps a hearing on DEP staffing issues. So we have a lot of ideas. It takes time to sort of finalize these ideas, recruit presenters, do the administrative things of picking a date and venue and so forth. But that's something our committee is working on.
Alrighty, and speaking of looking ahead to the future, real quick as we wrap up here, do you have any other bills in the works? Any other legislation that you're looking to move on?
Right. So I mentioned the environmental justice bill, which we're going to have the hearing on. We are reintroducing the bill that would restore the Department of Environmental Protection's ability to increase bonding amounts for unconventional drillers. That has been introduced. We are reintroduced. We are reintroducing the bill that clearly prohibits the spreading of roadside of brine on roadways and even vehicles, prohibiting vehicles from containing this spreading equipment. We are, just thinking about reintroducing a hydrogen bill. Haven't quite figured that one out again. And then there are bills, many bills. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of. And then there are bills that which continue to be referred to our committee, and we are we're trying to get bills because it's a tie right now. It's 102 in the House. We can't really pass anything too uncontroversial. So we're looking right now in the committee for bills that can get some sort of bipartisan support. And so we are hoping. We don't have a committee meeting for a number of weeks now that we're in the budget hearing phase, but by the time we have our next environmental meeting, hopefully we will have a number of bills we can kick out of committee and move up to the House floor.
Alrighty, and Rev, we have just a little bit of time left. Real quick, I want to ask you, at the time of this taping, it's before Super Bowl Sunday. Eagles are playing. What's your prediction for the big game?
Eagles, and I don't say that as a sort of a partisan. I think they're just peaking at the right moment. I think they're a loaded team. I think they have mature players who've been there before. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good about the Eagles. So I'm going to be there not there. I'm going to be in my living room cheering, but I'm thinking good thoughts, and I think they're going to do just fine.
All right, Rep, thank you so much. And folks, thank you all so much for tuning in to this edition of the Legislative Journal for February of 2025 with State Representative Greg Vitali from the 166th Legislative District representing Delaware County.